Hello, good evening. I'm Roger Johnson. Welcome to Tuesday's North West Tonight. Thank you for joining us. Our top story: a six-figure payoff for a priest in Blackburn who was thought to pose a risk to children. One senior cleric resigned over the church's handling of the case.
I couldn't work for an organisation which put its own reputation above victims and survivors.
Blackburn Cathedral has apologised, but its dean tells us that he doesn't trust the Church of England. A priest at Blackburn Cathedral who, over many years, was assessed as a potential risk to children and young people, was given a six-figure payoff to leave his post. A BBC investigation has looked into the case of Canon Andrew Hindley, which led to the resignation of another senior member of the clergy at the cathedral in protest at the way it was handled. And there are now calls for reform in the church, and tonight the Church of England has apologised for the way in which it dealt with the case. Well, Canon Hindley worked at the Blackburn diocese between 1991 and 2021. The BBC has found that there were 5 police investigations into allegations of sexual assault and misconduct by the priest between 1991 and 2018. Now, each was dropped and no charges were brought, and Canon Hindley has always denied any wrongdoing. He finally left after receiving that six-figure payoff in 2022. Let's go live to our reporter Yunus Muller. He's at Blackburn Cathedral for us. He's been following this story during the day today. So, Yunus, just first of all, tell us more about all these allegations.
Roger, Lancashire Police's 5 investigations into Andrew Hindley included allegations of a sexual assault of a teenager and sexual assault at a party in Cathedral Gardens. What the force is saying is that it reviewed all the information available, it took advice from the Crown Prosecution Service, and a decision was made there would be no charges. The force also looked into allegations that Canon Andrew Hindley had sex with teenagers who were below the age of consent at the time. Again, it looked at all the information, but when the canon and also the alleged victims denied the incidents had taken place, no action was taken.
So that's what the police did about these allegations, Yunus. What was done by the church?
They carried out independent risk assessments, and several concluded that Andrew Hindley posed a potential risk to children and young men. He was banned from visiting the choir school and school visits. He was also suspended twice. Now, at the time, the church also pursued this course of action where they wanted him to leave, so they offered him a payoff. That was far back as 2008. He eventually left in 2022. Now, what the church is saying was they won't tell us the exact amount, but we understand it was a six-figure sum, around £250,000. They say that this was to settle legal action that he was taking against the church after they tried to retire him on health grounds. But that payout led to resignation.
I took a decision on conscience that I couldn't work for an organisation which put its own reputation and the protection of alleged abusers above the protection and care and listening to victims and survivors.
So, Yunus, what does the investigation tell us about the state of child protection in the Church of England?
Roger, first of all, what we understand is that Blackburn Cathedral, it was recommended, should be closed to protect the public. That was at one stage. The church has today apologised to abuse survivors, and the Bishop of Blackburn has said that lessons have to be learned.
I don't think anybody can be quite happy with the way that that situation was resolved. There is a grey area around risk assessments, and so a priest can have a risk assessment which can indicate a level of risk, and the action, the powers of a diocesan bishop or a DSA are limited. But my view is that if a risk assessment says as a priest a risk, I should be able to take action. And at the moment, the disciplinary processes in the church are not strong enough to do that.
Now, Andrew Hindley has told the BBC that whenever judicial makers have looked at his case, he's always been exonerated. He also goes on to say that he was never a safeguarding risk to anyone, and what he also argues is that the action against him was motivated by homophobia and personal agendas.
Jonas, thank you. Jonas Muller there live at Blackburn Cathedral. Well, earlier I spoke to the Dean of Blackburn Cathedral, the Very Reverend Peter Howell-Jones, and I put it to him that with allegations dating back 25 years, the church couldn't have handled this much worse.
I totally agree with you. I think this was a meteoric failure, really, of structures and systems which should have been addressed, years before. I came to Blackburn Cathedral just over 7 years ago, knowing nothing about the case at appointment, and very quickly had to engage with it. And I just sort of reflect and think, if actually the church of which I am a part had begun to address some of its structures 10, 15 years before, these things may never have happened. And I'm deeply sorry for that.
Given that there were 5 police investigations where, it has to be said, no charges were brought, Canon Andrew Hindley's never been convicted of anything and denies any wrongdoing. But given that the church was aware about these allegations that were made over such a long time, how can it be that nothing was done or able to be done?
Yeah, absolutely. Time and time again, people tried to do things. He was suspended, risk assessments were done, independent risk assessments were done, but the processes that are there within the church just fail to allow one thing to lead to another.
So they're not fit for purpose?
I would totally say they are not fit for purpose. This is not the first case where these sorts of issues have bubbled up, and they will bubble up again if we do not address the terms and conditions. I didn't employ Canon Hindley. I didn't hold his licence, so I couldn't actually remove that. I couldn't actually say, it is time for you to finish employment here. I'd said that on many, many occasions to many, many people, that we need to do that. And the kickback always was, we don't have the powers to do that, which then goes down to systemic failure.
You say they could bubble up again. Ian Elliott, a child protection expert in the documentary, says, I do not feel the Church of England is safe. You said these could bubble up again. Are there... And again, we stress that Andrew Hindley has denied any wrongdoing, but are there people doing wrong within the Church of England, do you think, today?
I can't comment on that in the sense that I do not know every single person in the Church of England. I can remember being asked about institutions when I was interviewed to become a priest 33 years ago, and they referred to the police, and the question was, do you trust the police? And I thought it was a trick question. You can't trust an institution because an institution is made up of individual people. You can only trust individuals whom you can build relationship with and know.
So you don't trust the institution?
I don't trust the institution, no, I categorically do not. And that's not saying the church is not a good place, but it's made up of individual people, many of whom I do not know, and I do not know if they are doing good or bad. What I do know is that we have put structures in place within the cathedral, which I have oversight of, which means that our culture is 1,000 times better than it was when I entered. Our structures for ensuring the training and low-level concern policies and all that sort of stuff are in place.
But have you now got the power to actually do something about that?
I can do certain things.
But you still haven't got enough power.
If it's to do with a clergy person, I can't do anything.
So what needs to happen now, in a nutshell? In
a nutshell, I think the terms of conditions for clergy employment need to change so that actually we are able to deal effectively and quickly when we have situations like this.
Very Reverend Peter Howell-Jones, thank you very much for talking to us.
A pleasure.
Interestingly, you can hear more on that story on File on 4. It's called The Priest and the Payoff. It's at 8 o'clock this evening on BBC Radio 4. You can also find it now or any time on BBC Sounds. I had to listen to it earlier this afternoon, and it is fascinating to listen to.